attendant. And it can be um, part of protective factor can be incorporated in your work in every day as you're working with your students today. Um, as we go throughout this series, we will go that all the way into March, and in April, we will have an in-person training as well. So that schedule is available on our website at schoolspreventions.gov, and you can click on the professional learning series. We have all the training scheduled there, and hope to see you there in person as well. The prevention, our focus is on a protective factor and on the topic that are within the prevention and sharing that with school today. On the prevention website, we also have a professional learning request portal that you can click on that and bring specific training to your school district. So please use that resources as available to you. Just for today information, we have our ASL interpreter Amber here, and if you need specific for caption, please enable that by yourself. And then later on, we have breakout sessions, and Amber will be in room 1 if you need for ASL interpretation. So with that, our today's agenda. The first part will be talking about student life skill and chronic absenteeism. We have special guest Nicole Della Rocco as our senior accountant director from Panorama Education. Some of you LEAs are working, and Nicole is a lead person resident in Utah providing support to many of the LEAs. I think it's 350 schools that you are working with. So she's here. And so she present at the national information with the research there, and then we'll follow with Garrett and Megan from our attendance specialists here at USPE on specific work in Utah. So with that, I will invite Nicole. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm just going to share my screen. Folks who give me a thumbs up who are on camera, let me know if you can see that okay. Thank you. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. As Kuhn said, my name is Nicole Della Rocco. I'm a director here at Panorama Education. I've had the privilege of supporting LEAs across the state of Utah with our early warning system that brings together key indicators like attendance, academics, and behavior so that educators can proactively support students by seeing the whole picture of their experience. I'm excited today to share some new research with you from Panorama Education and hopefully advance the conversation that I know you all are having about chronic absenteeism in the state of Utah. I will take about 5 or 10 minutes or so. I'll start with a few slides on both the national and local trends that we're seeing related to attendance. We'll then dive into some new research that explores links between student perceptions and chronic absenteeism. And then we'll conclude with some resources and next steps. So in other words, why does this matter? What can we do? And what is our collective call to action? Chronic absenteeism, defined as missing 10% or more of school days, has notably increased since the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, the annual chronic absenteeism rate has nearly doubled from the 18-19 school year to the 23-24 school year. I know that all of you are seeing and thinking about similar trends in Utah, so let's zoom in here on a particular school. So here's one school's early warning system. On the left, you can see the percent of students that fall into different performance thresholds, green being on track, yellow and red being at risk or critical. On the right, we've isolated the student population to just those who are missing 10% or more of school days this year. You'll notice that when we do that, 59% of students become critical in academics compared to 38% when we did not restrict the population. As educators, we know that these indicators are connected and influence one another, but having data like this at our fingertips can help advance that conversation and help us know what students to support. Let's get into the research now that we just conducted this summer that will make some additional connections more apparent. So Panorama Education just completed the largest study in the US that looks at how student perception correlates with chronic absenteeism. The study had over 11 million student records and was designed to help school leaders identify the root cause of absenteeism. I'll go through a couple slides with some findings here. The first finding that we had was that factors mostly in a school's control, so things like climate, sense of safety, engagement, we found that those things can influence chronic absenteeism as much as 22%. So these are in-school factors that don't include things that are happening outside of school, at home, etc. What this indicates is that there's absolutely things that we can be doing as school leaders to help boost attendance. The next finding that we had was students who reported low academic confidence. These students were 1.5 to 1.9 times more likely, so almost 2 times more likely, depending on their grade level, to be chronically absent. So these are students that are reporting feeling like they can't succeed in achieving academic outcomes. Let's get to some grade-specific findings that we had in this study. And I will share a link to the full study so you could take a look, but I wanted to pull out some high-level findings for you today. So looking at elementary school students in particular, those students who reported low school safety were 1.5 times more likely to be chronically absent. So these are students who do not perceive that they are physically and or psychologically safe while at school. Let's move on to our middle school students. Middle school students who reported low school engagement are 1.8 times more likely to be chronically absent. So these are students who are reporting that they don't feel attentive and invested in school. Let's get to our high school students. High school students who reported limited relationships with teachers are 1.8 times more likely to be chronically absent. These are students who reported not feeling like they have strong social connections with their teachers. So this research indicates that by leveraging the right resources and interventions, school and district leaders can make significant strides in reducing chronic absenteeism and enhancing the educational experience for all students. We'll share a link with you, this slide deck that I'm presenting now with links to the report. So we encourage you all to take a look and reflect for yourself. Where are your students at? What are their strengths and areas for growth? How does this compare to other key indicators that you use regularly, such as looking at academic data or attendance data? What can we do as a school community to improve things at the tier 1 level, for example? Things like relationships, safety, and engagement, some of those topics that we talked about earlier. I'll say that the rise in chronic absenteeism is definitely a complex and multifaceted issue. And our hope is that by understanding some of its root causes, we can help to reverse that current trend that I presented earlier. And our hope is that this study, along with other great research that's happening across the country, provides you with valuable strategies that your school and district leaders can use. That's all for me. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have, or Moderator Kuhn, if you want to move to the next section and come back to questions later, whatever works best for you. But thank you, everyone, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nicole, for the information. And as Nicole say, we'll, as part of after the presentation today, we'll send you the recording of the information and also a link, so that you can have access to that as well. With that, we will, and if you have questions, just go ahead and put in the chat, and then we will monitor that and hopefully have time to answer at the end. If not, we will have a written answer for you all. So with that, we'll move into Gary Russell and Megan Manlove, who are attendance specialists here at Utah State Board of Education, and they are supporting us with this work. So with that, Garrett, take it away.
Sorry, Kuhn, let me just pull this up real quick.
Oh, I just saw that.
All right.
Just a note, we are in presenter note portion.
Let me get out of that then.
Well, Garrett, working on that. Just a note to everyone. Later on we'll have breakout sessions, so um, you can go to the room of your choice, and then just to make sure that if you need a ASL interpreter, Amber will be in room 1, so you can go to room 1 for that note.
All right, Kuhn, is that good now?
Not yet.
No. All right.
Okay,
Sweet.
there you go. Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Nicole. If you have not had a chance to look at Panorama's report that came out, definitely dive into it if you're getting into attendance work right now. It is very informative. Today, we're going to be talking about increasing student attendance. We have a few different topics today. First, we're going to talk about what USBE is currently doing to support LEAs across Utah. And then we're going to be looking at some best practices that we're seeing from around the state, current work that is being done, and then some next steps, as well as sharing resources as well. So our supports to LEAs currently for the school year. Right now, we are engaging with LEAs in yearly cohorts. We call these engagement and attendance cohorts, where they have a year-long focus on sustainable attendance systems and implementation. Each cohort's focus changes every year depending on their needs, but the overall layout for year 1 is going to be an LEA level teaming. Obviously, working on a district and charter level, things can be a little different. One might be more of a school focus, but one might be more of a district. And then building out the systems, stakeholder messaging, looking at appropriate data and making sure that collection is accurate, and then developing MTSS structures for attendance. And then our year 2 takes what they learned and builds upon that by implementing stakeholder surveys, working on community engagement, community resource mapping. If it's that district level that was in the year 1, then we start looking at moving into pilot schools so that we are getting school level teaming with that top-down implementation from the district, and then developing attendance campaigns and building on that MTSS structure as well, going from the tier 1 focus into more of a tier 2 and even tier 3 focus as well. We are also now sending out a monthly attendance newsletter. So USB attendance specialists send information to LEA attendance leads each month with important updates, current research that we're finding, articles, and then sharing Utah success stories from LEAs that we're partnering with as well. If you're the attendance lead and you have not received a reach out from Megan Menlove, please drop your information in the chat. And I also have her email at the end. This is for district attendance leads that can also send that information down to school attendance leads. So if we haven't been able to connect with you yet, this is a new project we're working on, and please drop that information so we can get you our mailer as well. And then the USB also supports Check and Connect. Check and Connect is the only tier 2 evidence-based mentoring program. In Utah, it identifies at-risk students for prevention based on their ABCs, which is attendance, behavior, and course performance. Mentors work with students and families to set goals to help students re-engage with schools with the goal of graduation. If you're looking for more information, we do have administrator trainings, which is a 1-day training. Those trainings are for admins or district level administrators to come and learn about the program to see if they're interested in implementing that in their district. And then we have a 2-day mentor training to certify mentors, and then refresher trainings as well. So they're throughout the year. We front load the mentor trainings in the fall, just as people are coming back to school. But then in the spring, as people are onboarding people for the next year, we have some more opportunities as well. All right, so moving into Utah best practices. A lot of these we are seeing from our cohorts, and then also information that we're gathering from our mailer and reach outs to local attendance leads. So across Utah, LEAs are doing incredible work to curb their chronic absenteeism, and they're working with students and families to re-engage in schools. Through research, we are finding that community resources is the #1 thing that is moving attendance in a positive direction. Helping to connect schools to their resources throughout the community can promote positive attendance conversations with a variety of stakeholders. Community resources can be resources for mental health, tutoring, transportation, after school programs. There's so many different resources that will re-engage families and also impact the community as well. And so looking at community resources in your local area as well as statewide is really helping move attendance and reaching different population groups around Utah. 211 Utah is a great resource. YMCAs, there is quite a few. So as questions come up, hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that. And then district level, LEA and school level teams, having multiple stakeholders on these teams has been really impactful as well. At the district level, looking for a superintendent or assistant superintendent, different grade level administrators, so elementary, junior high, and high school, IT, the public relations. So just getting a lot of people in those rooms to talk about it, how you can message things out, and then even community representation. I know some LEAs have their own public school board members on. They're reaching out to different community entities, parent teacher group, or parent community groups as well, to come and join those, to have those conversations. And then looking at developing those teams, having a monthly tier 1 attendance meeting. You should be looking at having a tier 1 meeting for at least an hour, and however you decide to do that hour is entirely up to you. Some are doing it monthly, some are bi-monthly, and some are even doing it weekly. So it's really what fits into your time slot. There are a lot of meetings in schools, and so just getting that conversation out and finding a deliberate hour to talk about campaigns, how you're reaching all students, messaging to all stakeholders, just focusing on that tier 1 where we're impacting all students in the school is something that's really moving attendance for those families that aren't getting the information, and figuring out how we can get that to them. But with those, you want to have an agenda. You want to make sure you're having action items that are being worked on and that assignments are given. I know a lot of us are in a lot of meetings where we don't feel like it was worth our time. So making sure that everybody has an action item and that they all see that their work is being contributed, or they're contributing their work to a larger goal as well, is very important. Some other wins: attendance specialists at the district level and school level. So finding that designated job title and having somebody at the district level that is able to trickle that down to the school level, and having somebody that's specifically looking at attendance campaigns, attendance data, attendance messaging, helping identify barriers, looking at targeted students. Somebody in that specific role is really helpful versus adding another role onto somebody else's position. And then I've said it a couple times now, but consistent stakeholder messaging, at least a monthly communication that is specific to attendance. This can be in an already going out principal email that goes out monthly, but you can communicate goals, you can talk about data. If you have a current campaign that you're running, impact on missed days. Now that we're getting into fall, developing a how sick is too sick document, working with your school nurses, local health departments, and trying to send out messaging on when your child should come and when they shouldn't come to school. This is a common one that we hear just because we came through a pandemic with COVID, and trying to get messaging about what is appropriate for sending students back to school is really important. And then as these teams are being developed and the systems are being developed, looking at getting stakeholder surveys to gauge the climate around attendance, and then also helping to address barriers in your local LEAs to attendance, and then trying to figure out different ways to build solutions around those barriers that have been developed as well. MTSS structures specifically for attendance. So looking at tier 1 universal practices for all students. This can be things like an attendance campaign, messaging that's going out. This can also be looking at overall school-wide data and identifying your peaks and your valleys. Like, what are some reasons that students are coming on specific days? Maybe food pantry items come, and so how can we spread those items out so that we get those higher attended days. And then also looking at those lower attended days. Is it a specific day of the week? Is it a specific class period at that secondary level, and trying to find solutions around that as well. And then tier 2 is going to be targeted supports for at-risk students. I kind of mentioned Check and Connect being supported at the state level, and then what else is done in schools. So developing your structure of what you're able to support, how you're able to support schools from the district level, and how you're able to support teachers in those as well. And then tier 3 is going to be intensive supports for families. This could be looking at DCFS referrals, court referrals, which we'll talk about here in a little bit as well, but something that's going to be a lot more intensive and more targeted. It is important to know that when you're developing this, I recognize that a lot of people want to immediately go into tier 2 and 3 because that's where we see our most need. But building up that foundational tier 1 practice is the most important. This is going to impact all students. And as you build up those foundational systems, you will notice that some of those tier 2 students that are on that cusp start coming a little bit more. They're getting more messaging. They're finding out about campaigns. Their parents are learning about the impacts. So really developing that foundation, it could take a year or two to have a really strong tier 1 before spending all of that time in tier 2 and 3, which is a lot more intensive. And then another thing that schools are doing across the state is revising their policy and procedures. You should be looking at your policies every 5 years. It doesn't mean it needs to be entirely rewritten, but making sure that it's still relevant, making revisions. We're finding a lot of schools are starting this work post-COVID to make sure that it aligns. And then also developing procedures to help stakeholders access and understand the policy and expectations, who's responsible for what role, how parents are able to make the impacts and what their role is as well. And then another thing that kind of links in with that MTSS structure is an attendance matrix, identifying steps and who's responsible for them while handling attendance. So an example is after every 3 absences, we want the classroom teacher to be making a phone call home. After 5 absences, maybe a friendly letter is going home, and then sharing that out in a PL or PD, whatever it's called in your district, so that people understand how their role fits into that matrix and how their phone calls, the letter goes home, how that is kind of sequential. And if we're making referrals without having all of these other interventions and supports taking place, then those don't typically go through. So having a matrix to identify when you do something in that attendance system is really helpful. Another one that's been really awesome. So Copperview Elementary has done family engagement nights. They brought in identified at-risk students and their families for an educational opportunity to teach about the impacts of attendance. They had teachers volunteer to be support. They brought in food to feed the families, and then they split it into 2 sections. So one group was going with different teachers, creating an attendance plan, while the other was eating. They swapped, and then they had follow-up with every single one of those families on those attendance plans as well. They were able to do it in multiple languages. They were able to bring community members in and talk about resources. So bringing family in and educating them about the impacts of attendance is very moving for those at-risk students and their families as well. And then even in Tooele, they're actually going a little further and making videos and classes for students and their families that are identified as well, so that they're able to log on to like a Canvas course, watch the video, take that class, and then look at making an attendance plan or things like that after. But these are all just different ways that LEAs across the state are identifying these needs, identifying these students, and then coming up with solutions and re-educating so that they're able to re-engage with families and students as well. And then research is also showing that teachers being the first contact for parents, it shows that they're the trusted contact. If you get a call from the principal, the counselor, a lot of times that's not always the best phone call, where the teacher is kind of that parent figure while the student is at school. And so you're able to get more information from the teachers as they make the phone call. Oh, maybe this is going on. This is some support we need. Where a lot of times with admin, families can be a little defensive as well. So utilizing teachers, letting them understand why it's important that they're making those phone calls, and then also supporting teachers by providing scripts, specific times to call if you have a shorter day. If you have 20 kids that need a phone call, maybe highlighting your top 5 just to get that contact happening. I know we want to call everybody, but if there's a huge amount, then you kind of scaffold that so that you're getting the most at need. And then when those have been reached, you can start reaching the other students as well. And then explaining to teachers how they fit into the process and why, so that you create more of that buy-in and support from your faculty as well. All right, so we are going to go to our first breakout room. In these breakout rooms, we are going to have you discuss what are your LEAs doing for attendance this year at the district level. What has your LEA tried since COVID to boost attendance? And this can be a success or a failure. Like sometimes we try things, it doesn't always work, and then we try something new. So sharing those problems of practice is really beneficial. And then what are some of your attendance wins this year based off things you're trying or even just things you're seeing after long-term development? We do have our breakout room 1 is going to have our ASL interpreter. So if you would like to be in that room, please make sure you stay in the main room as we're separating people, and then hop over to breakout room number 1.
Yeah, we are good, everybody.
We're good. All right, thanks,
Yeah.
Gun. If we had like 3 or 4 people that wanted to share out just a highlight of things that are possibly a win at certain LEAs that they heard in their breakout room, or something that you guys are trying as well. And I can share out for our breakout room some things that I had heard. And you can go ahead and just come off mute if you're ready to share.
One of the things we talked about in the breakout room I was in was that the school has started the regular team meetings to review data and decide what tier 1 approaches to take.
Nice. Yeah, looking at data and deciding on tier 1 approaches. That's awesome. Do we have one more that wanted to share? All right. In our breakout room, we talked about LEAs that are adding check and connect mentors, developing phone calls, so what that system looks like, and then even classes for students that are needing some more like remediation and reteaching around attendance expectations. And then one that I really loved was developing relationships with teachers, trying to gain that one trusted adult in the building to just have positive relationships with students. All right, and I'm going to move into our next section. This is current work for future support that USB is undergoing right now. So right now, USB attendance specialists, myself and Megan Menlove, are working with a group of LEAs across Utah and then cross-departmentally within USB to develop a usable toolkit for LEAs as they're developing their attendance teams and their attendance systems. This toolkit is going to be ready for the 25-26 school year. So right now it is in the drafting process and then editing and then re-releasing to those LEAs so that we're able to get feedback on what's usable, what needs to be added, that type of stuff. But what we're looking at in the toolkit is a section around teaming, a section around stakeholder engagement, which also includes community resources, data, what you should be looking at, what you should have access to, MTSS structures for attendance, identifying those tier 1, 2, and 3 interventions and supports that are available in Utah, and then looking at reflecting, adjusting, and celebrating as you're moving through this systems development process. And then we're also going to be linking in our board rule and legislative guide. Obviously, things change each year as legislative cycles come up. And so being able to turn to one spot that identifies what LEAs are supposed to be doing, what the expectations are, and then any updates and changes to those as well. And then the next thing that we are working on at USB is community resource mapping. So partnering with family and student engagement specialists to develop a statewide community resource to help LEAs as they are developing their community resource maps. So looking at addressing barriers like we had talked about around transportation, what's available in Utah, mental health, family services, hygiene, clothing, food, different languages, so having translation, propio, things like that, substance abuse, even parenting resources. These are all proven to help out with attendance. And so as we're developing things that are available statewide, LEAs can look at their local communities and see what else is available there that might not be around the entire state as well. And then we are also working collaboratively with multi-state cohorts through the U.S. Department of Ed, and then SEAC, which is the Student Engagement and Attendance Center, and then also Attendance Works. These opportunities provide new research on attendance, which we share out in that monthly newsletter. We discuss best practices, statewide implementation, and then attendance systems development right now. So we're actively engaging in our own research and education as well, so that we can send out important information to LEAs on current best practices and information around attendance. And we are also working on partnerships with DCFS and the Utah courts. Specialists are discussing steps towards creating referrals, court documents, and then what are the outcomes from those referrals. So we have talked about what happens when an educational neglect referral is made, and working with DCFS, educational neglect in itself is the only thing that they receive where a child is not able to be removed from the home unless there is a secondary finding. So what they typically do with those educational neglect referrals is go to the home. They will then conduct a visit. If there's no secondary finding, they will also provide the family resources, education, and a lot of things that the schools themselves are being asked to provide as well. So as you're looking at making those referrals, just knowing what those outcomes are going to be. And then habitual truancy. There was a new legislation where we've defined habitual truancy as 20 days absent. And then to make that habitual truancy referral to the court, you need that to happen 2 times, which would be a total of 40 days. And working with the courts, again, they're going to provide resources to that student, to that family. And then also, there is not something similar to DCFS that without a secondary finding, it's considered a non-judicial. So their goal is going to be providing resources and education to support that student and family versus sending them to a juvenile detention center for truancy. They wouldn't do that as well. And then also finding out about truancy mediation and how it is supported by Utah courts. I do have some things in the resource documents at the end that we can share so you can see how to make those referrals. We have referral forms that DCFS has helped create, and then also just information on truancy mediation and that process also. And like I had mentioned for our toolkit, we're working on our legislative guide to identify what LEAs are responsible for with attendance and what they are not responsible for as well. And then continually updating those changes and identifying the impacts based on those changes for each LEA so that they're all everybody is in compliance with the new legislative cycle and potential board rules if those are changed as well. All right, so next steps, the USB toolkit will be released for the start of the 25-26 school year. That will be linked on our website. And then our engagement and attendance cohorts will be having an opportunity to engage with that toolkit as well to give feedback. And then that's also how we're going to be doing our educational cycles off the toolkit as well. And then USB is currently working on creating a statewide attendance campaign to support LEAs with their attendance growth goals and linking that with multiple stakeholders across the state. So our goal is to have that ready for the 25-26 school year as well. And before the school year so that LEAs are able to access that and send messaging that is created from that out as well. And then USB is going to be partnering with LEAs across Utah that are leading in attendance work to highlight successes throughout the state and to share positive impacts. We've requested different data subgroups so that we're able to highlight different areas and different specific data sets so that we can see what is working across the state, and we can talk to that a little bit better and be able to highlight those schools that are doing things that are impacting attendance. All right, one more breakout session. For this one, again, breakout room number 1 is going to have our ASL translator. I believe you're going to be sent to a breakout room with about 5 to 8. So in that breakout room, if you could talk about what you can bring back to your LEA from this training, what could you potentially start in your LEA before winter break to set you up for an attendance win by the end of the school year? Just remembering that attendance work, there is no quick fix. It is a long-term systems development process. So what can you start with a vision towards the future? And then also, what can you develop this year to make a larger impact for next school year? The easiest way to start anything is just one step at a time. So as we hop into these breakout rooms, thinking about those 3 questions as well.
I just put the questions in the chat so you can have access to that, and then we just do so you'll be assigned to a room, and then for those needing ASL, we're going to stay on the main room here. So we invite Amber to stay at the main room, and that will be good. Krisa, would you please open the break room? Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Kun.
Hey, we're back.
All right. If we could just get 1 or 2 people to share out something that they feel like they can take back to their LEA, or even something that they can work on to develop for the rest of the school year and into next year as well. And we'll get 1 or 2. That way we have time for some questions here at the end as well. All right. If we don't have anybody that's willing to hop out, that's all good. I'm going to share a couple resources, and then we will hop into our question period. So as we're working on attendance teams and systems, I would say the first thing that's going to be impactful if you're looking at starting out right now is to create an attendance team. And then as you have your attendance team, whether it's at the school level or district level, taking a self-assessment. These are 2 resources provided by Attendance Works, either for the district or school level. And then that will show where you have gaps, areas that you can set goals for short-term and long-term. And then this would be kind of the area that I would start out in. And then some other resources on teaming. We have LEA level best practices as well as school level best practices, again, from Attendance Works. Developing an attendance calendar. There are samples and then also blank versions here. So you can see just some suggestions and then develop your own. And then attendance matrices. So it's school level absence continuum, again, a sample around best practices, and then a blank version to decide what fits in your local LEA. Community resources, so some information on resource mapping, and then reviewing available resources in an area. And right here is our DCFS and court referral document, as well as a link to the habitual truancy services by the Utah court system. Our MTSS structure, example of tiered practices, and then information on evidence-based practices. So check and connect, 3 tiers of intervention, the MTSS structure, and then Future Ed and Attendance Works had created an attendance playbook. This is like super informative and is kind of nice to be able to flip back and forth to, just to be able to see different content areas. It does break things down into tiers as well. And then I wanted to talk about some updated attendance legislation. We have SB 177, which has absenteeism prevention amendments in it, and then HB 362, which identified and defined the habitual truancy at 20 days. That starts on line 204 if you are interested. As you're looking at doing surveys, there is the seat from Attendance Works. And I also linked in some phone call scripts on those attendance phone calls, just as an example as well. And Now, I think we have a couple minutes. I can stay a little longer for questions. So if you guys want to drop things in the chat or come off mute if you have questions.
I submitted a question. Let's see, do I remember exactly how I worded it? That's it. Like, I did submit a question for this very reason. I basically submitted that we're a special school and, you know, all my students are on IEPs. So I get the direction always that we, like, there's not necessarily a lot that can be done. And I'm like, really? Really? I don't know if that's really the case just because we're a special school and all our kids are on IEPs. I mean, so we're not a regular school in a regular school district. So I'm like, so to me, does the legislate do the rules and the laws and those kind of things not apply to us?
Are you asking if like the habitual truancy, like the new law applies to your school?
Yeah, does that stuff apply to I would think it still does.
I would think it still does. I didn't see that in the law that there was like an amendment that it didn't apply to specific schools. I think that if there's, I guess we can even have a conversation if you want to reach out to me after and we can like sit down and try to dive into some more details on that as far as your school and where you're located. But
Okay.
yeah, I think that one might be a little bit more of an in-depth conversation on like what applies. There are still like the same requirements as far as students coming, reporting absences. So I guess I'm not 100% what you're asking, I guess, for the
I
specific
don't know.
question.
That is kind of what I'm asking. And
Okay.
I don't, it's like I get told we're different, but I'm like, I don't think we are.
Yeah.
Sarah,
Or sorry, Tanya, you can go ahead.
I had a conversation with Heather and asked her to reach out to me. I think we can get her some resources here from USB.
Okay.
I'll make sure to pull you into that conversation. But
That'd be
Heather's
great.
like
Yeah.
the USDB. So yeah, I can see how that might be a message that some administrators might think. But we can help her understand the guidelines and barriers and things like that around IEPs. So
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. I see there was a question about the requirements for reporting to DCFS. So in that resource that we had linked in there for the DCFS referral form, that is kind of walks you through making those referrals. But the main thing is that you've shown that you have provided multiple interventions for that student and tracked their progress. So if you provided an intervention to a student and they have increased, even if it's one day over a certain time period, then it's showing that that intervention is working and that you need to let the process play out. If there's no engagement from the student or family, then trying another intervention. And again, if there's no engagement from student or family, then looking at DCFS as a partner. But if there's things that are being done that are working at the school level, I get that we all want everybody there all the time, but if a kid's there 2 days a week and now they're there 3, then that's something is working with that student. So it's not always 100% of a win, but we've developed those systems and relationships over time. And DCFS, again, is going to help provide the family resources, similar to if you have a social worker, counselor, therapist, other things like that in the district as well. So you can use DCFS as a partner in the system, but they're not going to necessarily come down as the hammer and make them come and do something, where you have the opportunity to build those relationships as well.
Thank you, Garrett.
Did you want the other 2 questions that were in there, Kuhn, or?
We'll conclude that we will have that resurrect it, and
At
can
the
we get
end.
back to
Mhm.
folks
Yes, I'll get 'em.
via email? Is that okay?
Mhm.
Yep, so at this time is 1:02, so thank you again and all the folks here. We will have the recordings with the recording, and thank you, Nicole, for presenting today. We'll also have that link for you as well since in and out. Just as a note, you can always access to our website. Oop, gonna share I'm gonna see. Just go to school the Utah.gov prevention. We have a list of menu that our prevention is in charge of. You can click on professional learning link. We have all the trainings information up there. And our next webinar will be on November 20th, and that will be concrete support as part of the protective factors. So with that, we'll want to thank you and reach out to us if you have any questions. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, everyone.